Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
What is crack-a-lackin', Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale, coming at you once more without my fantabulous co-host, Adam Frommel. If you are listening to this podcast on Thursday, September 30th, it is Adam's 30th birthday. He is no longer a baby, so wish him a happy birthday at Frommel09. He's actually on a trip, which I could not make and was invited on. Rest assured, we're real-life friends. That's what makes Hardwood Knocks so fucking special and sub-mediocre at times. Anyway, we're soldiering on with our team look-aheads. We're up to the Dallas Mavericks. I have Dalton Trigg, who is the founder and lead host for the Step Back Mavs podcast. They are also under the Blue Wire Pods umbrella. He is likewise a writer and editor for Mavericks SI. Follow him on Twitter at Dalton_Trigg. That's at DALTON_TRIGG. We get a great conversation, covered a lot of ground here. Luka, Kristaps, Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi, Kleber, the whole nine. Please note that we talked about which big should be starting alongside KP since he's going to be playing the four. And we settled on pretty much everyone but Dwight Powell. And then it was later released as soon as we finished recording that it was going to be Dwight Powell. Maybe not as soon as we finished recording, but you get the point. So disregard that, but also our talk about fit absolutely positively matters. Very super incredibly quickly, let me just remind you, implore you, continue begging you to rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you're getting your podcast. Download every episode. It helps us out a ton. If this is your first time listening to Hardwood Knocks because you are a Mavericks fan, Dalton retweeted this and you're giving it a shot. Maybe you just stumbled upon us accidentally, whatever. Throw us a permanent subscription. We're worth it for the most part. We cover the whole league at large, again, in a pleasantly sub-mediocre fashion. And we ask everyone to just head over to iTunes, whether or not you use it, if you have access to it. Search Hardwood Knocks, throw us that 5-star rating, write a review, even if you have criticism, so long as you throw us that 5-star rating. We do take it into heart and account, and every single rating/review does help us out a bunch on the Apple charts. Follow us on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks. Please remember to check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks. We will come up. We're also on Instagram at Hardwood_Knocks. I'm out of breath from all this effing self-promotion. So let's get into the Dallas Mavericks with Dalton Trigg. Dalton, thank you so much for coming on the Hardwood Knocks podcast to talk some Mavericks with me. I think first and foremost, we have to start with a congratulations on getting access to your personal Twitter account back. That's got to feel incredible.
Yeah, that was a time. Free agency is kind of like my time. That's when I get real excited for stuff that's likely not going to happen because the Mavs always strike out in free agency, but it's always a fun time nonetheless. And I was kind of on the sidelines for all that. So I'm glad they finally got me back. They doubled down and made up for it and verified me recently. So that was a good surprise too. So
that's a roller coaster trajectory, and a lot of people don't get their accounts back. So you're probably even lucky.
Yeah, that was a wild 2-month swing for me.
That's a great segue though, because you mentioned people getting invested in Mavericks pipe dreams, and I have zero qualms about trolling any NBA team, and I love doing it. It gives me life. This offseason, however, it just didn't feel like the offseason to troll the Mavericks because the pipe dream equity wasn't there. It was Kyle Lowry or bust, and then even if you were going to contingencies, it was like, Spencer Dinwiddie, okay, great, but is that someone to get really upset over? So do you think the Mavs Twitter seemed disappointed from as many people as I follow on Mavs Twitter or what was retweeted in my timeline. They seemed a little disappointed at first. Do you think the criticism is kind of overblown for their absence of making a big swing this offseason?
I think the criticism is overblown, but the reaction to how the offseason ended up, it's kind of one of those things where, like, yes, it is overblown because the Mavs did make some good moves, even though it wasn't real splashy. They did improve their team. The roster is better than it was last year. That's just a fact. But, the reaction to that is warranted, I think, in my opinion, because of the expectations that, that were set at the top. Mark Cuban made comments and said that this team needs another, like a bona fide second scorer, basically hinted
you got Frank Ntilikina, man.
Yeah.
Home.
Basically hinted that Kristaps Porzingis had come up short there. Said they needed one of the main goals of the offseason was to add some secondary playmaking and ball handling to lessen Luka's load. And, Kyle Lowry obviously would have helped with that. But like you said, past that, there's not really, that many options there. And I had heard or seen somewhere that Spencer Dinwiddie, even if the Mavs had tried to get him, I think New Orleans was second on his list past Washington. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the reaction was warranted given the expectations, but overall, when you look at it, those expectations shouldn't have been set that high anyway, based on what they had to deal with this. So the problem with it is this was the last summer, at least for the next couple of years, right, 2 or 3 years, that the Mavs were going to have a decent amount of money to spend. So that's where the frustration.
They're pretty cash strapped.
The real frustration is rooted back in 2019 when they also had a bunch of cash to spend and they decided to just kind of sit on their hands. And when they found out they weren't going to get Kemba Walker, who they went after, they waited for Danny Green's decision for like 5 days and wasted free agency. So that's where all this is rooted at, and people just really just want them to spend money. But yeah, I mean, this offseason, it turned out well for them, but they'll have to go out there and win some games to kind of change people's minds.
Is it fair to say that in lieu of being able to get that secondary playmaker, because they just didn't get him, like that just didn't happen, they decided, hey, we're going to lean all the way into just Luka-plus-shooting at this point?
I think that's pretty much what it is, right now. I mean, obviously they're hoping that they have some internal development from some of the guys with, in that department with the secondary ball handling and distributing and all that. But for the most part, they're kind of going back to what they were the season before they tragically traded Seth Curry for Josh Richardson, which was just an absolute disaster. So they're kind of going back to the time.
I can't even dunk on the trade, right, because I understood it at the time, and I was like, oh, Josh Richardson just had a little bit of a down year in Philly. He can't get any worse, and rest assured, it got worse.
Yeah, that's typically the Mavs' luck if you look back at some of the signings they've had over the years. But I mean, I look at, and somebody made the comment the other day because I put that Reggie Bullock, he's going to end up making a ton of threes for the Mavs this year, and he's a great corner 3-point shooter, which is what the Mavs need. I think he was like 46% from the corners last year. It's going to be a big upgrade for them, just like the style of player he is, and he's just an overall better shooter for his career than Josh Richardson was. And I've had some people say, well, yeah, that's what we said with Josh Richardson last year too. But I mean, you look at their careers and how long they've been doing this and the volume of 3-point shooting and everything, and I really don't think it's close between Bullock and Richardson. I think that's going to be a much better fit, and they'll get back to the style of play we saw the year before last, where they led the league in offense.
Yeah, Josh Richardson has never been like a catch and shoot guy or like this motion guy, and that's very much been what Reggie Bullock has done his entire career on offense. You ask him to put the ball on the floor, there's going to be issues. It's going to be an adventure. But as someone who could play off others, I thought that was a smart signing. I thought the Knicks were dumb for not keeping him. I know they wanted to lean into shot creation, but they had Kemba and Rose and Burks and Evan Fournier. It felt like they had room to, not sign one of them and keep Bullock, because he was also their best perimeter defender last year. And so you are getting that in addition to pairing him with Dorian Finney-Smith. I like the Sterling Brown addition too. He had a quietly good season in Houston last year, ran some point for them, and is someone else who I don't think he's going to give you any like tertiary shot creation in real meaningful minutes, but as someone who can play off Luka and then again also defend up. Like he defends bigger than he actually is. No, those were not home runs, but I thought they were shrewd signings in an offseason where it just didn't feel like the Mavs had any other realistic options.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that playoff series against the Clippers, and they pushed them to 7 games. It really shouldn't have even gone to 7 games because, Luka, he was subbed out way too early in that game 3 where they were up so big and lost the lead and all that. But as that series went on, you got to looking at the roster, and it's like, okay, what can they do different here to kind of put them over the top against this Clippers team? And it's just like they just ran out of options. They didn't really have anybody to throw out there like Reggie Bullock or Sterling Brown. So it'll be great to have them on the team this year. It's 2 very capable players. Like you said, it's not like a home run type signing. Both guys have really flown under the radar, in my opinion, at least from like an overall league perspective. I think most Mavs fans have kind of come around to the idea that, hey, these guys are going to help a good bit. But I mean, I'm really excited for them personally. I think anybody who plays with Luka, especially if you can shoot the 3, is going to benefit even more from that. So I'm excited to see what they can do.
Is there anyone on this roster that you can see even graduating into a facsimile of like that second option that Luka needs? And I think I would narrow it down, and just so we can actually talk about these players, it feels like it would be Jalen Brunson or Tim Hardaway Jr. is the closest they would come, and just that's it. Or do you see anyone else on this roster that would potentially be an option there?
You talking about just like from an overall scoring?
Like, we know Tim Hardaway Jr. can make shots. We know Jalen Brunson can put like real pressure on the rim, but you need someone else on this team, in my opinion, to hit off the dribble jumpers. And Jason Kidd can talk about Kristaps pulling up from mid range all he wants. I don't want to see it. And until it starts happening and those jumpers start falling, I'm probably going to think that Brunson or Hardaway Jr. is still their second best chance at having, but I would call a legitimate number 2 option, someone who's not so dependent on Luka to have their offense generated.
Yeah, I think at this point, and Tim Hardaway Jr., he's made strides since he came over from New York in that KP trade a couple years ago. But
you mean the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade?
The Tim Hardaway Jr. trade is what it turned out to be. Yeah. So I mean, he's been great. He was just like a volume 3-point chucker at one point, but now he's taking smarter 3-point shots. He's worked with God Shamgod on his dribbling and everything. So he's become better in that department. It's not something that he's going to do regularly, but he's capable of, driving past people and getting to the rim. And he had some thunderous dunks last year, and that's always fun when he breaks one of those out. But I think if I had to pick one, I would go with Jalen Brunson just because of his age. He's a good bit younger than Hardaway Jr. He's gotten, if you look at his stats since his rookie year, he's gotten better every single season. So there's no reason for me to believe that he won't get better again this season. And he almost had 50-40-90 efficiency last year. So he was really efficient. There were times, especially in that Clippers series, where he would take on a guy like Paul George and he's like a bowling ball. He just like kind of throw him off of him and get to the rim and hit a contested layup or something like that. So I think if I had to pick between the two, I feel more confident saying that, Jalen Brunson could eventually grow into that role, but I still would like to see the Mavs address that by either a trade or a Goran Dragic buyout, something like that. I would like to see them add to that a little bit, even if it's not, adding an actual star.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you just based off also how Jalen Brunson played last year. His playoff performance worried me a little bit, but it's such a small sample that you can't, I guess, read too much into it. I would agree with you. They need to figure out a way to get someone else in there. I would be shocked if Goran Dragic gets bought out this season. I think the Raptors would have to be just terrible. Or maybe he's so bad that they buy him out. But that does feel like a very much middle of the season development. Some players in the league, it gets to a point where they're so good, it's tough to imagine what they look like if they're better. But they're also so young that it's like, okay, they didn't peak. Luka is one of those guys, MVP candidate, can just do everything on offense. What does a better version of Luka Doncic look like at this point? Is it one that can actually get some rest? Like,
I mean, it's really funny because I just wrote a training camp profile on Luka for DallasBasketball.com a few days ago, and I gave him a little preview at the front part of it, and then on the back end, it was like, okay, expectations for Luka this season. And it was almost humorous because you get to looking at what he's done over the last 3 years, especially the last two, being a all NBA first team guy 2 years in a row, almost averaged a triple-double last year, really improved his three-point shooting. He was 35% overall from the season, but, from I think the last almost 40 games of that season last year, he shot 37%. So that's continuing to get better. Honestly, I don't really know. The expectations are kind of the same from an overall production standpoint, but there's still areas where he can improve. The free throw shooting has been a problem. For a guy of his stature, shooting and getting to the line nearly 8 times per game for his career so far, shooting 73% from the line just isn't going to cut it. He's got to improve there. He's got to work on controlling his emotions better. He got some silly technicals, almost got to a point where he was suspended, towards the end of the season because of that. So he's got to get that. He's got to work on that. But yeah, adding two guys like Bullock and Sterling Brown can really help him, take his game to the next level. Like you said, just by maybe giving him a little bit more rest. Maybe you have more games that you're able to put away early and he's not having to do every single thing for every single minute he's out there in order to get you a win, because the usage rate really is a problem right now. And that's what they need to focus on, cutting back on this year. He can still give you the production that he's given you with a less usage rate.
Right. And so when I was racking my brain trying to think about this, basically everything you said, what I came up with was Luka plays like the same amount of minutes, but he's averaging 30 and 10 because his efficiency has gone up. His teammates are hitting more of his shots, and maybe his turnovers have come down because there's just more room for him to operate. And that's, that it doesn't seem like that much of a leap because he averaged like 27 and 9 last year, essentially. But if you're getting 30 and 10 from him on better efficiency in 34, 35 minutes, that's fucking incredible.
No team can afford to overpay for talent. Build a championship team with Indeed, the smart way to only pay for quality candidates that meet your must-have requirements. When hiring gets hard, you need Indeed, the job site that makes hiring incredibly simple. Just attract, interview, and hire. In fact, with Indeed, you can do all of your hiring in just one place. Indeed knows how important it is to make the most of your recruiting hours and dollars. And with Indeed, you can save time and money by setting your must-have qualifications and only pay for the quality candidates that meet them. Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Offer valid through September 30th. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey guys, looking for a betting advantage this football season? You need to download BetQL, the only app you'll need to compare betting odds and make smart bets. Their best bet computer model scans over 350,000 unique bets per year to give you a best bet recommendation for every game across all major sports and gives you the reasoning behind why you should place the bet. Their model covers everything from spreads, over-unders, and player prop bets. Don't want to use this model and prefer to do the research yourself? Well, BetQL has all the necessary tools for your betting research needs. Tools like line movement and sharp data on who the pros are backing, team summaries highlighting previous success against the spread and over-under, team lineup breaking news and injury status updates, and leaderboards to track how you stack up against others and to view your winning streaks. Better data, better bets. Head to the App Store or Google Play Store now to download BetQL. You can also head to try.betql.co/Blue Wire to get started now. Enter the discount code Blue Wire at payment checkout for 25% off any of their subscription offerings. Make sure to check out their offers page to find a special offer to receive a full free year of BetQL. Don't miss out on the chance to gain your betting advantage during this football season.
So Jason Kidd already mentioned, did not take long, that he plans to play Kristaps Porzingis at the 4. What do you make of that? Do you support that decision? He's also says that he wants to encourage him to take different shots. I know Kristaps was more efficient in the post last year. He was still not efficient in the post overall. Like, it just wasn't that. So what do you sort of make of that? And the follow-up to that would be, if Kristaps is going to play a bunch of power forward, who is the big on the Mavericks roster that needs to log the most time beside him in those stretches?
Well, the first part of that is I'm okay with it if say like Maxi Kleber, if he is the Maxi Kleber that we saw pre-COVID, because he got COVID last year, and when he came back from that, and he was dealing with an Achilles issue towards the end of last season too, he just wasn't the same. I mean, his shooting percentages were okay, but on the defensive end, it was just like he was washed. So I'm hoping that was just like a lingering, because I mean, I had COVID the end of last year, and it took me like 2 or 3 months before I was like completely right. You know, I was still up and going around and everything, but it took me. I know it, and everybody, you know, it affects them differently. But
for athletes, you said they need to use inhalers now, so like it's
right.
The impact of it is real, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, if he comes back and he's like his pre-COVID self, where he's a really good rim protector, and he can still go out there and defend on the perimeter every now and then if he needs to, then, you know, putting him at the 5 and KP at the 4, I'd be okay with that. You know, I think we're at a point right now with this Mavs roster, though, that I don't think a lineup is going to be set in stone throughout the season. I think it's going to depend on matchups. Mm-hmm. You know, because it's like say the Utah Jazz when the Mavs played them last year, they really benefited by having KP at the 5 and Dorian Finney-Smith at the 4, you know, drawing out Gobert to the 3-point line and everything. So that works well for him. I think we'll see a lot of that this season, where you have a starting lineup of like Luka, Tim Hardaway Jr., Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith, and KP. But, you know, it just depends on who they're playing. I don't necessarily like KP at the 4. I think he's better as a 5 if he's completely healthy, which he seems to be now, because this has been talked about on Mavs Twitter and just Mavs fans everywhere the entire offseason. But this has really been like his first fully healthy offseason ever. Like
that was their biggest offseason addition, was Kristaps Porzingis summer workouts.
Yeah, I mean that really was it, because, you know, usually he's rehabbing some kind of injury he suffered during the previous season, and then he's playing catch up, getting into shape, and it takes him, you know, a month into the season before we start seeing better production from him. So that shouldn't be an issue this year. And if all that is the case, then, you know, I don't have a problem with it, but we'll see how it goes. I prefer him at the 5, but, you know, if he plays at the 4 and Maxi's okay.
That's because he's a center. That's why you prefer Kristaps Porzingis at the 5. It's because he's
and this one flies under the radar, and I know people have mixed opinions on this guy, but Willie Cauley-Stein, he had some really good two-man lineup numbers with KP last year. Before they hit that stretch where pretty much everyone on the team got COVID and missed 3 weeks, they had some games where KP and Willie were playing together, and the defense was incredible, and the offense really wasn't lacking that much either. So that would be something I'd be interested in seeing too. I don't know how much Cauley-Stein can sustain, you know, at that level of play, like if they do it for a long period of games, but it'd be something I'd like him to stick with as long as it works.
Yeah, I would prefer Kleber just functionally, because then you have both of those guys can space the floor. And if you do want Kristaps Porzingis to vary up his offensive usage, Cauley-Stein is going to be occupying, like, you know, Kristaps isn't going to have room to just dribble into the lane, or as much room, and you definitely can't necessarily post him up in those situations. And also, the Kleber Porzingis minutes in 2019, 2020, they never made sense to me, because those two make so much sense together on the court, and the splits weren't great. They kind of turned a corner toward the end of the year, and then that kept up. Like, I looked up the data. The minutes were good with those two last year. So I like that fit better. But I did see on Mavs Twitter that a lot of them, and I'm assuming it's because of that two-man data you mentioned, were very high. I'm like, oh, it needs to be Cauley-Stein next to KP. Maybe that's better defensively, because I've always viewed Kleber as like, he's like a rim protector, but he's like a super mobile big, where he just might be better. Like, they use him to like guard Kawhi at points in previous matchups. So maybe you trust Cauley-Stein more as like that backline protection, but like also maybe Kristaps Porzingis should be doing that more. So I'm surprised that Mavs Twitter was so married to the idea of like Cauley-Stein and Porzingis playing minutes together.
It's more of an athleticism thing too, because, you know, you can throw lobs to Willie,
That's a good point.
You know that he's already, he's a good defender, and his stats back that up. Every time, or at least his plus minus stuff. He's like an advanced stats darling, so to speak. But I don't know. I like I said earlier, if Kleber is healthy and he gets back to how he was defensively before he had all of his issues last year, that would be my first option there. But if it's not, if he looks like the Kleber towards the end of the year on that end of the court, and it's causing issues having KP at the 4, and if Jason Kidd is determined to keep him at the 4, then I think you have to make a move and try Willie Cauley-Stein for a little bit.
I guess maybe I just have PTSD from seeing Willie Cauley-Stein miss too many bunnies at the rim over the course.
He has his moments where it really head scratching moments. It's kind of frustrating and everything, but from an overall standpoint, it just seems like when he's on the court, even with those miscues, it seems like the team overall ends up performing better in those minutes for whatever reasons. So if it comes down to it, I'm willing to live with some of those annoying moments for the greater good.
Please don't let the fact that this is the official "We Would Die for Frank Ntilikina" podcast among NBA circles. But among these players, who do you think has the best opportunity to make an impact for the Mavs this season? Trey Burke, Josh Green, or Frank Ntilikina?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to go with Frank Ntilikina just because he does
like to hear around these players.
He's still young. He's 23 years old. The Mavs, I know they have a different regime now, but overall they're pretty familiar with him. They were widely expected to draft him before the Knicks took him a spot ahead of Dennis Smith Jr. back in 2017. So I think they'll get a good bit out of him. He has a fresh start. If you play defense, it's just something the Mavs really need, especially from their guard position. So I could see him having more of an impact this season and getting more of an opportunity. I will say that it was hard for me, though, because I really love Josh Green. I've been a big fan of him since they drafted him. I thought that was the right choice at the time. I still think he has a bunch of potential. But, I would like to see him get some opportunities. As good of a defender he is. He showed a lot of flashes last year, and he really surprised me too. I did a player profile on him recently too, but there were times last year where he would pass the ball and it was like flashy passes. It was on the money. Okay. It was something that I didn't know he had coming out of the draft, and I'm sure it surprised a lot of other people too. And I was just thinking, like, man, if he can do this on at least a little bit more consistent basis, that would help with the the secondary distributing issue that the Mavs have. But overall, I'm going to go with Ntilikina, especially if he can shoot the 3 ball. I know it was very limited volume last year for him shooting the 3, but if he can shoot over 40% from 3 and play the kind of defense he plays, he's going to have an impact from the moment he gets his first opportunity.
I've long thought, in actual seriousness, that he is a 3-and-D wing that people just viewed as a guard, and they couldn't find the right role for him in New York, even though I think it was staring them in the face. So I hope he gets run with the Mavs. I would die for Frank Ntilikina at this point. But Josh,
say that.
Please go ahead.
No, I'll say this. I do think he's going to, because the Mavs have 16 guaranteed rosters right now, and I would be shocked if he doesn't end up making the final roster. I think Trey Burke's going to be the guy that ends up getting cut before all this is over with. So,
look, in defense of Trey Burke, the Mavs might not have Luka if not for him, because he helped the Knicks win some pretty meaningless games down the stretch of that season before the draft. So they might want to keep him on for karmically. Josh Green, I would love to see him get more run. I'm just wondering if, having Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then even Sterling Brown. I think I've seen some Mavs depth chart projections where like Josh Green's ahead of Sterling Brown, but I would be a little bit shocked just based off the immediate expectations of this team if he's like, even like, will he be their 4th or 5th wing? Like, that's pretty hard to get minutes in that scenario.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for sure, because, and that's why I said I think Frank will end up getting, more opportunities in the guard positions, even though, like you said, you think his best spot is being a 3-and-D wing. But, I mean, Josh Green, he's going to have to make the most out of his opportunities that he gets early on. If he doesn't, then he very well could find himself buried in the rotation again. Even though Rick Carlisle is no longer here and it's a new head coach and everything, we kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt last year, Green that is, just because Rick Carlisle is famous for being super hard on rookies and not giving them a lot of run and all that stuff. But if Josh Green doesn't come out this year and take advantage of those early opportunities to where he can solidify a rotation spot, then it's going to get harder and harder to keep hyping him up. But I'm holding on hope because like I said, I loved him coming out of the draft. I thought he was exactly what the Mavs needed at the time. I didn't think Josh Richardson, like you said, I mean, I thought it was the right move at the time too. But it just blew up in their faces, and he didn't get a lot of opportunity. And those guys, the rookies last year, they didn't even get to go play with the Texas Legends in the G League because the Texas Legends didn't participate in the G League bubble. So even Tyrell Terry, when they assigned him to the G League, he was playing for the Memphis Hustle, and he had his own personal stuff going on last year. So it was just a weird year. I'm hoping for a little bit more internal development from those guys.
I do think people tend to scoff at the idea when you talk about players like that for a team that's as good as the Mavs. But when you look at just what they have in place, those are the types of players that you need to hit on, at least until that final New York draft pick conveys and your trade asset trove just opens up a little bit. And I'm not saying because you need to use them as trade assets, but you're also now dealing with very limited cap flexibility moving forward. These are the types of projects that you need to hit on to deepen your team and bolster your rotation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Mavs draft history is horrible. It just overall, if you go back looking at every year that they've drafted, I mean, Luka and Jalen Brunson in one draft is the best they've done since they got Dirk. And they didn't even draft Dirk.
Right.
I guess they didn't draft Luka either. They traded for him. So, I mean, they really just haven't done that great in the draft. It's really sad. I mean, because you look at some of these teams, you look at the Golden State Warriors, how lucky they got hitting on all those guys and ended up creating a dynasty. It'd be nice to just have one or two guys that they draft that turns into a really, really good rotation player. Now, given they've had guys that they've taken flyers on as undrafted free agents, like Dorian Finney-Smith and Maxi Kleber that have, they've worked with and developed and turned them into something. But it'd be nice to have a guy, a first-round pick like Josh Green or a fringe first-round pick like Tyrell Terry, have a really good second year and just keep developing. And then you have a really good asset on a rookie deal that you can, even if you don't keep them on, at least you'll have a guy that can produce and you could potentially use in trade packages. And then all of my pipe dream trade ideas won't be such pipe dreams then.
Is there any insight aside from what we know about Kristaps Porzingis into what we can maybe expect differently from the Mavs under Jason Kidd? Is it maybe actually getting out in transition? Is he going to bring back that wildly aggressive, I don't even know what the word would be, I don't want to say ineffective, but very risky defensive style that we saw him champion in Milwaukee? Any clues there just to what we could expect, if there's just a major functional point that you expect the Mavs to sort of go about differently with Jason Kidd at the helm?
Given the off season and adding guys like Bullock and Sterling Brown and I mean, I don't know how the center rotation stuff is going to turn out, but I really like some of the stuff I saw from Moses Brown last year. They traded Josh Richardson to Boston to get Moses Brown, and he may not even be on the roster by the time the season starts.
He sometimes looks like he's wading through cement, but that might be good. Yeah.
The thing I've liked is, so far through the first day of training camp, the other day they showed him getting advice from Tyson Chandler, who's at Mavs camp, coaching him up. So I think if you're going to learn from somebody, former Mav that'll help lead the team to a championship, that helps a lot. But anyway, I think the main thing with Jason Kidd is, like you said, they're going to get out and run more. They're not going to have near as much play calling as, what they did at times with Rick Carlisle. And I've kind of joked and said that's because you probably don't want Jason Kidd calling a bunch of plays, given his previous head coaching history. But, maybe he'll surprise a bunch of people there. But when you have a guy like Luka who sees the floor the way he does, and he's able to create his own shot, He can get past a guy and see another guy in a corner, or, he can create stuff that you don't have to call plays for. So I think they will get out and run a lot more this season. And Luka, I don't know if you saw him for his media day stuff, but I mean, he's in the best shape he's ever been for a preseason.
I saw the picture comparison. I don't know that was going around Twitter. Yeah, he does look like he's in really good shape.
Yeah, he was not in, prime NBA shape starting last season, and his shooting percentages really struggled. And that's one reason why he didn't shoot more than 35% for the year from three, because it was so awful the first month and a half that it was playing catch up from there. But I think he kind of took that to heart. He played for Slovenia in a great Olympics run this offseason. And I think he really took it to heart how he started last year. So I think we're going to see, pedal to the metal from the very, very beginning of this year from Luka. And I think that'll help with, like I said, the style difference this year for the Mavs. I think they will get out and transition more and get a lot more easy buckets because of that.
We've reached the cookie cutter portion of the podcast. These are questions that I ask in every look ahead. And this one, I know it can change based on what happens in the season, but as of right now, who do you think is the most likely player to be traded from this roster? And we've already talked about what we know they need most. Is there a player that springs to mind that you would realistically like to see them target on the trade market?
I'd say, I want to say Dwight Powell, just because I would like to see Dwight Powell traded.
What is the attachment to Dwight Powell with him? Is it just a cultural touchstone thing?
I don't think there's an attachment to him, as much of an attachment to him now as there was, during the Rick Carlisle era and Donnie Nelson era. But I think it's at a point now to where it's like, well, he's making $11 million this year and next season. So that contract was a bad contract from day one. So that it's just going to be hard to trade him, because I mean, he's a good leader. He's everybody likes him, and he's real athletic and everything. But unless he gets back to what he was before he tore his Achilles, they're just kind of stuck with it there. So I don't know. I'd kind of like to see them do something with his contract, even if they have to add in an asset to move off of it. But I hate to say it, but probably Jalen Brunson if they don't come to an agreement on a contract extension. Yeah. Because the way his contract was set up, it was just a straight 4-year deal, and there was no option or anything like that. So at the end of this year, instead of going into restricted free agency like a lot of guys would, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So if they don't come to an agreement on an extension as it's getting closer to the trade deadline, I feel like that's a guy who you could include in a trade and get a good bit of value back for, because he's really good. I think he has the potential to be a starting point guard, on another team somewhere. So I think he'd be an attractive asset, and I think they could get a good bit back for him. And as far as a guy that I would like for them to target, it kind of gets back into and you said realistic, I think, which I tend to struggle with when making fake trades. But I don't know. I'm still keeping my eye on Zach LaVine. I know the Bulls made a lot of moves this offseason, and, they had a really splashy offseason and everything. But I'm interested in seeing just how good that team is. Like, I expect them to make the playoffs, but I don't know that they'll be in the top half of the East. I just want to see how good that team is as they're approaching the trade deadline, because like Jalen Brunson, and obviously it's two completely different level players, but Zach LaVine, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next summer if they don't come to an agreement on an extension. So that's what I would set my sights for. And as far as under that, I'm really not sure. I don't know. I don't want Ben Simmons.
Two names for you to consider that are definitely tiers below the names you're thinking, because I just don't see how the Mavs have the equity to get those types of guys. This would be the more ambitious one. But if the Spurs eventually lean into their rebuild and they just decide this guy's a little bit too old or the upside isn't there, Derek White, big fan of Derek White, and you have the contracts to match. So what type of draft equity? Do they like Jalen Brunson, any of the other players on your roster? The other one I think is eminently more gettable, and I think Mavs fans who are listening to this podcast are going to absolutely despise it. I would just argue for them to go dig into the data a little bit about what he does. Eric Gordon would be a great fit for this team to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be fine with an Eric Gordon trade. I like the type of player he is. I think he fits into what this team is trying to do right now. It's funny because it's kind of like that James Harden Rockets-esque type of offense that they're going to be doing now, where they're just running a lot and shooting a bunch of threes and everything. So, I mean, yeah, I'd be fine with Eric Gordon. I don't know exactly how much he's making, so I'll have to dig into that and see.
It's his third year of his contract is basically non-guaranteed. It's like 2 years and $38 million. The health is the major concern. But when you look at him as just taking ultra deep threes and spacing the defense that way, he was also, before he got injured, one of the 5 most efficient finishers on drives last year. So just as now that you're the Mavs, if you were planning on having cap space, I get why you don't want Eric Gordon on your books. But now that cap space is gone and that's over, I would welcome Eric Gordon on my books if I was the Mavs at this point.
Right. Yeah. And whatever that average, the Mavs still have I think is it $18 or $19 million trade exception? No, it's not that much, is it?
I can look that up as we're speaking. My next question to you, though, is what do you think should be this team's go-to crunch time lineup?
Crunch time lineup, I would go with, and honestly, it would depend on what team you're playing. But if I just had to, count on somebody to get a bucket, I'd go with Luka, Tim Hardaway Jr., Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith, and KP.
I think that's where I'd land too. Like you said, it's matchup based, but I think is like a crux of a lineup. I think KP at the 5 just makes the most sense to close with.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just talking about, because I think that lineup has some good defensive capabilities. Like Luka, I know he got some flack for how he played on defense earlier in his career, but he was actually pretty good last year in certain areas, when he wasn't, yelling at referees. But he was better on the defensive end. Tim Hardaway Jr., that's one place where, he used to just be a swinging door on defense, but that's another area he's kind of improved on at least a little bit since he came over from New York. Like you said, Reggie Bullock, he's a good perimeter defender. Dorian Finney-Smith is too, and then KP, if he's completely healthy, we know what he can do on that end. It's just, when he was recovering from that meniscus injury, his lateral movement just was not there. It was just completely non-existent. Every time the Mavs played the Portland Trailblazers, I cringed because I knew what Dame Lillard was going to do to him on a switch, which he does to a lot of people, but it gives the appearance of KP just not trying, when in all reality, he just didn't have the physical ability to, keep up with it. So I'm hoping that's better this year.
Yeah, having watched a lot of earlier KP when he was healthier, I think he's not going to be like holding. Maxi Kleber was probably better to hold up in that situation, but he was not like the deer on ice that he was last season as often.
And Dorian Finney-Smith, I mean, he had some really clutch moments for the Mavs last year, through the regular season, and he hit some big shots in the postseason, at least during those first couple of games where they took a 2-0 lead. So, I mean, I think having him in a crunch time lineup, and this is his 6th season in the league, so I feel like he'll continue to get more experience and be better in those situations too.
Is there a really weird oddball lineup that maybe Jason Kidd would never try that you still want to see them roll out?
Well, Rick Carlisle, he loved short guards. Well, yeah, that's
actually not that's not fair, because as you said, he liked to go with a bunch of guards. So I'm going to retract that. And a bunch of guards is pro fun. Please, Kevin.
Yeah. It was always a joke between me and my co-host Matt Galatson on our own podcast. If Rick Carlisle had 5 guys under 6 feet that he could roll out in one lineup, he probably would. So now, if we're just being funny here, you look at the Mavs roster, they currently have 6 bigs, and which I think is ridiculous. I think they really do need to make another move before the start of the season, just to kind of balance that out a little bit. Either get another wing or just for depth reasons, or, finally address their secondary ball handling or distributing that was stated as a top priority. And here we are close to October and they still haven't addressed it. So I think they should do that. But, if they ran out Luka and just a massive lineup, just have KP at the 5, have Maxi at the 4, Willie Cauley-Stein, throw in all the centers there. Just put Luka in centers and see what happens.
I went the complete opposite direction. I would like to see Luka, Frankie Smokes, Reggie Bullock, Sterling Brown, and Dorian Finney-Smith. Luka plus a bunch of pro defense wings, and it's super small. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, no, that would be fun too. Yeah, put Luka at center and, let him play like Nikola Jokic and put a bunch of smaller well, really not smaller, but just athletic defenders around him and see what they can do. I think that'd be fun.
As we record this, the Mavs' current win total over-under set at 48.5. Are you taking the over or the under on that? And where would you sort of place them within the rest of the Western Conference at this point?
I'm taking the over. I think, and I know that's shocking coming from somebody who covers the Mavs and is around the Mavs all the time and everything, but I really do think this team will have a lot of regular season success. I think the areas they need to address on the roster will become more prevalent when they get to the postseason. They have time to address that, but as currently constructed, I think they'll win a lot of regular season games. I think they'll win at least 50 games, if not slightly over that, and end up getting in that top 4 in the West for the regular season. Now, like I said, when they do get to the postseason, I hope they've addressed some of these issues that plagued them last year. Because, they were still 5th in the West last year after having all the issues with players out. They were one of the top, I think they were the top 2 teams, them and some other team, that had missed the most combined games due to players being out with COVID.
Stopped tracking that last year because it was so depressing. So yeah, I'll take your word for it.
It was awful. Yeah, they were in the top 2. I don't know who the top team was, but they were in the top there for guys that missed. Like I said, you had KP recovering from the meniscus injury and trying to get back in shape. Luka didn't start out the season in the best of shape, and despite all of that, they still ended up being 5th in the West. So I think they'll end up with home court this year. I personally think they'll end up being in that 3rd spot when the season's over. But 3rd or 4th, that's where I see them being this season.
Their ceiling to me is 1st because the West is so wide open, and I think the way they're built to play is great for the regular season, as you've already brought up as the playoff concerns. I might go under just because they have a new coach and because I've picked so many overs throughout these podcasts, but I will eventually do an exclusive over-under podcast, so I'll think about it more there. Is there anything I did not ask you about this team, or anyone I didn't ask you about that you think needs to be really covered really quickly before I get you out of here?
I think the Jason Kidd stuff is something to watch because I know a lot of people have been pessimistic about, they think it's just going to be a disaster. And like I said, given how his previous head coaching stops have gone and some of the stories that have come out of, how he was towards certain players and everything, I
power
get it.
Struggles behind the scenes.
Yeah, right. Power struggles and everything. I understand why people are pessimistic about it, but if you look at what he did as an assistant coach with the Lakers the last 2 years, and he's admitted that he jumped into head coaching far too quick. He should have started out learning as an assistant first before getting into that. So he's admitted that. He's had all the reports coming from, people with the Lakers have been nothing but, good the last couple of years. So the more recent stuff is good. He's friends with Mark Cuban. He's friends with Dirk Nowitzki, who is now a special advisor for the front office. Nico Harrison, him and Nico Harrison were reportedly a package deal for the Mavs. So, they GM, head coach, I don't think there's going to be a power struggle there because they're friends. And they've been friends for a long time. So, and I think he relates to Luka on more of a personal level than like Rick Carlisle did, because I asked Mark Cuban the other day about it, and he was just saying how he thinks Jason Kidd's a top 3 point guard in league history, and that that his experience is going to mean everything for furthering Luka's development. And he can, it's a guy that maybe Luka can trust more in crunch time situations, or at least guiding him on, because he's been there and done it before. So, I mean, that's the only other thing I would touch on. I think there's a lot of stuff that's come out, and even Jason Kidd's personal life in the past, it's been, there's been some bad stuff there. But I think now, just talking about now, him with the Mavs, coaching Luka and everything, I think it's going to end up being more positive than what people think.
He's in when you look at the on the court stuff, I just need to see it happen to believe it. I wasn't a fan of the hire. And just so people don't think we're glossing over the off court stuff.
And I wasn't, to be clear, I wasn't either. I wanted him to hire Jamal Mosley.
Apparently Rick Carlisle did not want the Mavs to do that, though. That was, but the Jason Kidd pleading guilty to domestic violence in 2001, I think was the year. I wasn't a fan. Obviously, you're not a fan of that. I didn't think that the Mavs adequately answered to that during his introductory press conference. That being said, to hear Cynthia Marshall, who identifies as a domestic abuse survivor, I believe, say that she spoke with him, that doesn't make it makes it difficult more, because I want to respect her opinion of all opinions as someone who is a domestic abuse survivor. So that decision, I still wasn't a fan of it, but if that happened, that happened. On the court specifically, I don't trust it. But as you mentioned with the Luka stuff, and there's a very high opinion among Jason Kidd and his ability to relate to players around the league. That's even Giannis liked him in Milwaukee, even though I think Jason Kidd actively damaged Giannis's progress in Milwaukee. So on the court, I do think it's wait and see. But I think after Brooklyn and Milwaukee, I'm like, I need to see like Jason Kidd like adapt as a coach before I'm just ready to believe it.
And that's completely fair. Everybody. That's how most people are. I've talked to a lot of people that's been the same way. It's like you're optimistic about it, but you want to see it first. And I mean, another thing is Dirk Nowitzki. He's still like yes. I mean, his opinion is heavily weighed with what the Mavs do, especially since they added him as a special advisor. So when he gave his blessing to hiring Jason Kidd, that was pretty much it. So, I mean, I know there was a lot of complaining about it, and I was part of that at the beginning too, because I really did like Jamal Mosley. But, after a certain point, it was just like, it is what it is. Might as well look forward to it, be optimistic. Because when you have Luka Doncic on your team, I don't really think it matters about.
That's what I don't know how Jason Kidd, like you don't fuck up Luka. There's that.
Yeah. The X's and O's stuff doesn't really matter as much when you have a guy like Luka. They're going to win a bunch of games regardless. You could have a mascot as your head coach and still win a bunch of games. So
I still need to know what happened between Rick Carlisle and Jamal Mosley. If anyone has the lowdown on it, at Dampa Valley in my DMs, I need to know. But Dalton, you've already stayed 5 minutes longer than I said I'd keep you. Can you just let our listeners know where they can find you and your work?
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Dalton_Trigg. It's Trigg.
And not suspended on Twitter, am I dead?
That
again.
Verified and unsuspended. So that's good. But yeah, at Dalton_Trigg with 2 G's. And then we post all of our podcast stuff. We have the Mavs Step Back podcast, and you can find that at Step Back Mavs.
It is a great podcast. Dalton, thanks again for giving me some of your time to talk about Dallas. And rest assured, I will be pestering you again in the future. So thanks once more for coming on.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Good stuff.
Sign up for WynnBET Sportsbook at WYNNBet.com today using promo code BlueWire to get up to $1,000 toward a risk-free sports bet. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.